they had experienced the expulsion of the Jews from Lithuania in the First World War. So at a moment's notice, I think it was 1914 or 15, the war was in the Jews were expelled from Shovel and other towns and this was because the Russians were scared that the Jews, being fluent in the Yiddish language, would spy and transmit information to the Germans, who eventually conquered Shovel. Anyhow, so my mother used to, she was about 6 when this happened. And she used to tell us the story, but we didn't realize how awful and horrific it was. There was my grandfather, Josef Seltz, my Zayda, my Boba, Jetta. I don't think the grandmother, Boba Tema, was living with him yet. So there was my grandfather, my Zayda, my Boba, my uncle and my mother, Hillel and Chaya. Then there was 2 other sisters of my Boba, Hindel, whose husband was Tante Hindel's husband was in South Africa when they were expelled from Lithuania. She had 6 children. My Tante Chaitze, the other sister, was a widow and she had 3. So work that out. My Zayda, the only adult male, with 9, 10, 11 children and 3 women. That was quite something. And they were put, I think, into these horrible cattle trucks and a few perinas, the blankets, the dunas, whatever you call them. And no facilities, except when they got somewhere, then they got out, made a little fire, made a bit of food, and eventually, they got to Tula, where fortunately the 3 sisters had a brother, Avram Laser Rosenberg, who was married to Tante Masha, and they had 5 children. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened to them or their children, but I'm trying to find out. And because they were pretty wealthy, they had accommodation, not in their own home, but somewhere else in one of these courtyard type places where the 12 of them stayed for the duration of the First World War. The problem was, how did they make a living? How did they survive? Well, I suppose maybe Avram Laser might have helped them a bit, but there's a limit to how much you can give to a group of 12 people. So I know that my Zayda might have tried making sweets to try and sell. And apparently it was an illegal occupation to engage in commerce. So he was caught and put into jail. But one of the nieces, who was older, much older, she was probably a teenager, very attractive, Lily Itola, she managed to get him out of jail. Maybe bribery, probably. And the Avram Laser's family, my mother used to describe their home to us. This was in the in the First World War. Apparently they had 2 salons, the grand piano in the one and an upright in the other. Can you imagine? I didn't need television. And then the Jews were allowed back into Lithuania, so they made the horrible journey back, by which time all the kids were older. My mother was, it was 6 years later, she was a teenager already. And she also used to tell us, she never described the horrors of the journey. She was a little girl, so to her it was perhaps just an adventure. But I don't know, maybe she was trying to protect us. But she did say that when they got to the border between Russia and Lithuania, on these awful cattle trucks, there was a delousing station in a town called Abelai, in Yiddish Abel. And this is how they described Abel. Abel are blotters. Do you know what blotters are? The mud. Must have been the end of winter or something, and there was mud all over the blotter, and they were full of lice, and it must have been, ugh, you can just picture it. They went through that, were allowed back into Lithuania, because I think they left without passports, or these internal passports that they needed. And their house, of course, which I'm not sure if they owned it, but it had been destroyed. So where did they stay? Fortunately, they had relatives by the name of Malkin, and their home had survived, so they stayed with the Malkins.